How do you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, yeah.
Hello, good evening. Hello, good evening. Welcome to the Bible and You. I am Pastor Demetrius Serrier. I am hosting tonight. We have a special program tonight. We are actually part of the Convention 2020, Mount Zion Church of God, 7th Day in Toronto. And we give thanks for the brethren who are in Toronto right now that is celebrating this wonderful time together. Began last night on the theme One Body in Christ. And so we bless God for them. They were on last night. And what a wonderful time that we had in worship and just sharing the word of God with Brother Lavier. And today the service continued again with worship. There was a panel discussion hosted by Pastor Desmond. And of course, the sermon by Pastor David Leonce. And Convention 2021 will be ending tomorrow. So tomorrow is the last evening. So if you have not gotten any part of it, we ask you to join tomorrow to be part of this great service. This is the Bible and You, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this special broadcast, hosting the youth from the Church of God 7th Day, Mount Zion Church of God 7th Day in Toronto.
Welcome to our COG7 radio program, The Bible and You, airing every Saturday night, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, join us for 2 hours of relevant, practical, and sound discussions highlighting an end-time message and the imminent return of the Messiah. The Bible and You seeks to provide biblically sound answers to your questions. We intend to highlight the areas where the Bible is absolutely clear, rightly dividing the word of truth and eliminating all doubts. And now, here is our hosts, Pastor Gil Monrose, Pastor Demetrius, with tonight's biblical guest teachers. The Bible and You, where speculation and sensationalism are replaced by solid Bible facts.
Thank you. The Bible and You. Actually, Pastor Gil, who is out of town this evening, he'll probably be joining us a little later. I'm not sure. He's about 6 hours behind us. So it's about 26 minutes after the hour. Where he is probably about 1:30, so he'll be joining us later this evening. But again, I'm glad to be on with you. We're joined again by the young people from Mount Zion Church of God 7th Day in Toronto. We have Sister Francine, who's on with us tonight, Sister Brianna, Sister Shaniqua, and Brother Antonio, and perhaps Sister Janelle will be joining us later. The theme for this convention is one body in Christ, and young people have been doing a lot of work. Today's discussion is centered around the topic, bridging the generation gap in the church. And most of you that are familiar with our church recognize that there is a generational gap. There's perhaps in some churches there may be 3 or 4 or even 5 different generations. And so we have been discussing the issue of generational gaps. Today we want to examine a number of questions, a number of things dealing with the generational gap and to see how well we can do that. What I'd like to do as we dive into this topic this evening, one of the things that have become very, very important, and I just want to invite our young people to really look at this afternoon as we discuss bridging the generational gap. There are probably several disadvantages in having a generational gap. And of course, there are several advantages in having a generational gap. But what I want to bring this conversation to is building on, as we examine how we can bridge the gap, building on what I call building on what we probably will describe as having for us something that we can maybe 10 years from now or 15 years from now, as we start the discussion this evening on bridging the gap, how can we look at the existing challenge that is before us and start working towards building something so in the future we can look back to today and say, all right, on August 21st, 2021, we began working towards bridging the gap. I know it's an easy to identify problems. It's easy to say, well, here are some of the things that we probably find challenging, here are some of the things that's probably not working. But at the same time, what I want to challenge you, Sister Francine, Sister Brianna, Sister Shaniqua, Brother Antonio, is to discuss with me today, while we examine the problem, how can we build? How can we build towards something in the future? And so you have been studying as a backdrop, 1 Kings chapter 12, especially verse 6. You looked at the life of Rehoboam, who was the eldest son of Solomon. And while we will not go in depth into the scripture today, we saw a young man. I call him young. He became king when he was about 41 years old. And he reigned for about 17 years. So he probably lived to age 58. And according to what we understand to be, the generation, if he was living today, he probably would be in what we call a Gen X or Generation X, based on his age. And we saw him doing a number of things. We saw him consulting with the elders that were with his father, but then turning around to deal with some of the issues with his peers, with his friends. And he rejected the counsel of the elders, and he took the counsel of the younger. And I think what the backdrop of that story tells us is that there is an issue with generational gap. One of the things that you've identified as we begin this conversation is communication. And so I want to start with you. Let's start with Sister Francine from my extreme left. As we talk about ways that we can bridge the generational gap, you would agree that communication is perhaps the most important thing between young people and people that are a little older. You would agree with that, Sister Francine, would you? Can you hear me? Can you hear me? I'm not sure if you heard me. Okay, I can't hear her. I'm sorry. Would you like me to repeat the question? Is that what you're saying? Okay. Thank you. But you can hear me correctly? Can you hear me? All right, good. All right, so you would agree with me that if we were to seriously start bridging the gap between the younger generation and the older generation, that communication, how we talk to each other, how we communicate would be the most important factor. Would you agree with that statement?
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, in your opinion, what are some of the ways do you think communication can help in bridging the gap between the older folks? Do you feel that as a young person, do you sometimes feel that it is easy to talk? It is easier to talk with your friends than older people? And if that, and what do you think causes that? What do you think the reason for that is?
Can you hear me, right?
Yes, I can hear you.
Uh, I feel like it's easier to talk to people who's my age than like than people who's like older. It depends on the person at the end of the day, like in the older generation. But personally, for me, I feel like it's easier for me to talk to people like who's in my age group. 'Cause I feel like they more like I'm more closer to people in that type of age group than someone who's older in
Right.
the older generation.
Okay. Thank you for that. Sister Brianna, do you feel the same way as Sister Francine? Do you feel the same way that as she does?
Yeah, I do feel the same way.
And why do you think that that gap exists? Why do you think it's a lot easier for the younger generation to understand each other better than the older generation?
I think maybe sometimes like us as the younger generation would probably feel like if we go to the older, we'd get judged, or they'll just like probably brush aside the situation and tell me and say like maybe no, this is the way to do it, instead of actually giving out proper advice. Although all advice is good, but it probably in the way that we probably want to hear it and then absorb that advice is like probably the way they won't do it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. But as I said from the beginning, one of the things that I'm hoping we can do, because you I don't know if you'd agree with me. It's very easy for us to sit and talk about the problem. We can identify the problem. We can say this is not working, that is not working. But what I'm hoping we can do is start building. Um, you know, a lot of people, just to give an example of what I'm talking about, a lot of people would be in a church and they would say, "Well, I don't like the way the church is. That church doesn't have good music or good praise and worship, or that church don't they don't do a lot of those things that we need to do." And so they would leave that church and they would go to another church that has better activities and greater things like that. But here is the point that I want to make. Somebody took the time to build that. Somebody took the time to build a better church. Would you agree with that? That somebody took the time to really make it, have good praise and worship, have good music, have good programs for the youth, have great things. Somebody took the time to build that, right? Would you agree with that? That it didn't just start where it is. It didn't just happen.
Yeah.
Okay. So if somebody took the time to do that, all I'm saying is, as a church organization, whether you're at Mount Zion or you at Jerusalem or you somewhere else, all I am saying is, if we think this way, if we think that we need to take the time to build on something so that tomorrow we could have something greater, that is what I would like for us to have a conversation about. So, given the fact that, and I agree with you, that um, it's easier for you to talk to your friends. For me, it's easier for me to talk to people that are in my age group. I feel like they understand me better. Um, why do you think that problem exists? Why do you think it's like you said, the older folks seems to brush you aside, and they think that their way is better. Do you have any idea as to why you think that is? Why is that? Why is it that way?
So for me, I probably like won't go to like, let's say Francine about a situation, but it'll probably be somebody that's like a little older than me that they've probably gone through it too. Should I forgot what? Why is that?
Yes.
Okay. Why is that? I feel like because probably they have more of the understanding about it.
Right. So you think that people like Francine and Sister Shaniqua can relate to you a little better than somebody who's older? Is it because they can relate to you better?
In a way, it's like kind of like both. I don't even know how to explain it.
Okay. All right, that's fine. We'll come back to that. Sister Shaniqua, am I saying your name correctly?
Yeah, you're saying it correctly.
So there is the perception that older people believe that young people are careless, irresponsible, disrespectful. When I was growing up, it would be like, do what I say, And so there is that perception. Do you feel like when people look at you and they say that, as a young person, you're careless or you're irresponsible or you're disrespectful, do you feel like they're right all the time or some of the time?
I think that they're right sometimes, but it also depends on the situation. If it's to say like, if I have a skirt that's like kind of close to my knee, but it's not actually on my knee, maybe they might say, oh, I'm so careless because of the way they approach me, and they're like, oh, why is that so short? Why is that so short? If they approach me in a right way and say, my sister, your skirt's a little too short, then I'll be right. Because if a sister were to come up and say your skirt is too short, maybe that sister might say, oh, I don't care. And they will, of course, think that you're careless. But in another situation, maybe when they were to speak, then sorry, if they were to speak then and say that I was careless and irresponsible, it depends on the situation, then I would agree with them.
Okay. So it depends on the situation.
Yeah, it all depends on what happens.
All right. Okay. Brother Antonio, welcome. I guess you are one of the brave brothers at Mount Zion, How are you doing today?
Sorry?
I guess you are one of the brave brothers at Mount Zion.
I can't understand.
Can you hear me?
Oh, I'm doing good. I'm fine.
Okay. So in this part of the conversation, we're talking about communication. Sister Francine, we and Sister Brianna, and of course Sister Shaniqua talk about that how young people tend to communicate with older people. There is that in my opinion, misunderstanding. Can you think of a way that would, as we bridge the gap, how we could improve on both older folks and younger folks? How can we improve on the way that we communicate so that we don't feel judged? Sister Brianna talked about, young people, they feel judged some of the times, that they don't feel disrespected. They don't feel, Sister Shaniqua talked about, somebody talk about her skirt. My question to you is, can you think of a way that as we bridge the gap, that we, the older folks, can talk to the younger folks in a way that we could really get the message across and not have that tension between the generations?
What I feel is that this whole situation is just a whole big misunderstanding, and how it's like talking to two different languages, and one language is trying to speak to the other, but the other one is not understanding. So what I think is that how we can at least fix the bond is by trying to learn the other's language so that we can understand them better.
Okay, great point. So basically you're saying that, and I'm just using hypotheticals, older people are speaking Spanish and younger people are speaking German. And so we need to learn, somebody needs to learn how to speak the language so we could communicate. So break that down for me. Give me a practical way we can do that. Sister Brianna talks about like some of the time. Do you feel judged sometimes when older folks approach you, Brother Antonio? Do you feel that way?
I mean, to be honest, not really, but I feel like the girls like because of what like how back in the day it was like very like the girls had to make sure that they cover themselves and everything like that, and the boys, they can since it wasn't like the boys didn't have attraction with one another like we have to do now, but back in the day it was like the boys were like very like they could do whatever they want, but the girls they had to make sure they cover themselves because it was just that how they their tradition how they works. And now what they're trying to do, what I feel like old people is doing, is that they're trying to mix the olden days with what's happening to new days. Well, I think is that because of the new technology and the media, we get exposed to some things that the what like the greater generation or silent generation or baby boomers wouldn't have been able to be exposed to. For example, back in the day, if even if a woman was to lift up a shirt to just to a knee level high, men will go crazy over that. But now we're seeing that every the men's now seeing that every time and they don't even care. So I think that now since they're seeing that all the time, they're thinking that, oh, it's bad because when back in our day you couldn't do that. That was like a sin. Like you'd be you're probably like a prostitute, or like you want boys to have attention to you. But no, it's really what how the clothing today and how it's like the times has just changed. And I think that people just need to understand that. But we also need to our generation also needs to understand that we have to keep ourselves modest, and we also have to take advice because they have the wisdom and they went through more stuff than we have. So we gotta learn to like take one another's advice and try not to think that one is greater than the other.
Okay. Thank you. Appreciate that. You're listening to us on the Bible and You. Today we are hosting the young people from Mount Zion Church of God Seventh Day in Toronto, Canada. We're pleased today to have Sister Francine, Sister Brianna, Sister Shaniqua, and Brother Antonio with us. We're discussing the topic, bridging the gap, the generation gap between young people. We recognize that in many of our churches, we have a generation gap. And so we have been talking to them about ways that we could communicate better. Sister Francine, I don't know if you want to comment on this. We have a young person down here in Miami in the chat, and she's saying to us that sometimes having a simple relationship would make information easy to receive. And what I'm understanding that to be is that if there is a good working relationship between the generations, the younger generation and the older generation, that it'll be a lot easier to communicate with each other, a lot easier to to respond. Maybe trying to get to know the young person you are trying to correct. Sometimes having a simple relationship would make information easier to receive. So in trying to connect with young people, having a relationship would probably be easier. What do you think about that comment? What are your views on that comment? Do you think that having relationship is one of the ways that we could better communicate with each other?
Yes, I do agree with that. I feel like if you have a good relationship with someone, it's better to communicate with them. So if the young people have a good good relationship with the older people, it would bring out a good communication with them. So it's like now it's like I don't have to go to someone my age for advice or anything. I can just go to someone older that I trust.
Right.
Because I have that relationship with them, and it's like it's not about like I have to go to them with my problem. We can just regularly they can just check up on me. I check up on them. They haven't like that relationship, and it's gonna have good communication. So I think I do agree with that comment.
And what are some of the things you think can be done to help bridge to help build that relationship? Can you give me some examples? Like if let's say you, and I'm not putting the burden only on you as a young person, but let's just say there was someone older that you had a bad experience with, and you just feel, okay, you know what, as a child of God, as a believer, a disciple of Jesus Christ, I want to do better. What are some of the things you would do in order to help remedy that relationship? What are some of the things that you think, and what advice would you give to other young people? Let's say Sister Brianna comes to you and Sister Brianna says, you know, Sister Brown, you know, she really treated me badly, but I want to have a better relationship with Sister Brown, and I don't know how to start. I don't know what to do. You know, what would you encourage Sister Brianna to do in building that relationship with Sister Brown?
I feel like the advice I give Brianna is to like go to her, and you have to like resolve that problem that's happened like between them. So like go to her and tell her in a kindly way, be like, you told me something, I didn't like it really hurt my feelings. And like if Brianna say it in like in a nice calming way, like she come to her in a calming fashion, and Sister Brown was like opening, like listening to her, and like actually listen to her and hear like her side, and Sister Brown can apologize, and that's where the relationship can build off from. Because you can't just go in a relationship with someone after they did you wrong and just forget about it. You also have to talk about it for the situation can just go past. So I feel like if the advice I would tell her to just go to Sister Brown and tell her this and this and this, and you know they can, and after Sister Brown can say this and this and this, and the relationship can build off of that, and now they're gonna have maybe they can probably have a good communication system, and they have a good relationship at the end.
All right. Thank you for that. So, Sister Brianna, let's dive into the scripture in First Kings, which is the backdrop of this conversation. I'm sure you have been discussing what happened with Rehoboam. He was not. Most people would not call a 41-year-old man young, but you know, being a new king, there are a lot of things that he did not know. I mean, he saw his father Solomon reigning, but he probably didn't know a lot of the things of how to become king. So here, this man, Rehoboam, went to ask the older men that you know their advice. What do you think I should do as a king? And they gave him advice. They told him to you know, it's okay. You need to be friends with Jeroboam. You know, be friends with them. And then he rejected their advice. He said, I'm not taking this advice. I'm not doing that. He went to the young men, and the young men said to him, you need to tell these guys that you are going to punish them worse than your father. You're going to make life harder for them. And this man did exactly what the young people said that they told him to do, you know, the younger generations to do. And what that caused in Israel at the time, it caused a separation. It caused a division between the northern and the southern tribes. It broke them up in pieces. As you think about that story in 1 Kings chapter 12, what are some of the effects that young people who, in that example, give bad advice, what are some of the effects those things can have on the overall, like we want to bring it now to our days? Can you think of an example where just listening to young people who maybe don't have the experience, like Brother Antonio says, can cause a really serious problem in the church? And what are some of the effects on always just listening to the young people? Sister Bree, can you share your thoughts on that as you look at that story? My question to you is, what are some of the effects on not taking advice from older people, just listening to the young friends, when you look at what happened in Israel at the time?
So you said what are some of the effects of not listening to the older people?
Yes.
To the older people? Okay, so
You remember the story in 1 Kings chapter 12. You're familiar with that? You're familiar with that story, right? Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. So the decision Rehoboam made brought division to the nation of Israel. What effects can us, referring to the youth, versus them, referring to the adults, attitude have upon a church? Well, first of all, it will cause division. Just make the bonding even worse. I think that if we can just get over the past and try to at least try to understand one another, we won't have this young versus old problem. It's just, remember what we discussed today. We talked about how we are one and everything like that. We can't be divided. So the same thing we have, we have what, like Brazil and Germany, how they are separated and stuff like that. We have Canada, we have USA, they're separated, but still they make up one nation. They make up North America. That's what I'm trying to say, that even if we have young, we have old, and even though they kind of have different opinions about stuff and speak they speak different languages, we still have to be one nation. We still have to try to settle our differences and try to come and one together. So Christ spoke about not looking down upon the other. We have to all look up at this exact same level. The old people, what we have to do is but for us, we have to start trying to see that we're all that, and try to see that we're only young people and we don't know everything. And old people need to understand that they shouldn't look down on us and be like, we know everything and you guys know nothing, and you guys have no say in the matter and we have all the say in the matter. So that's what I think, that how we can prevent all this division. Yeah.
I feel like so basically we need to come to an agreement. What's that word?
Compromise?
Yes, a compromise. Agree to disagree. That's what I want to say. Agree to disagree. Maybe as young people, we could be wrong, and as older people, they could be wrong. But we need to be able to come to an agreement where, okay, we could take from you, we could take from you, and bring it as one, and everything could flow flow as one.
Right, but where do you think we need to begin? I agree with you. There has to be a compromise. There has to be an understanding. I agree with all of you. I agree with what Brother Antonio says. His analogy of speaking the same language. But where do we begin? I know we're speaking in hypotheticals. I know we're saying this is how we need to do it. And I don't want to pick on any example that you think is happening in the church, But what I want to ask you, Sister Brianna, is where can we begin? Where do you think we can start today to say, all right, as a young person, this is what I'm willing to do. This is an area that I'm willing to work in. So when we leave here tonight, this would be an assignment that I've watched you many times do praise and worship. It's a blessing to us, and I think that's one of the areas that you enjoy very much. But what are some other areas that you can say, you know what, this is an area where I'm willing to make some compromise? Can you think of an area?
Okay, so I feel like since we are in the our era, our generation, us young people generation, right? So I feel like maybe as older people, they should take into the day and age we're living in right now into consideration first, and then see how they can put into what they've learned from whatever year they were born, whatever past tense, right? And then bring it together so we could all um just make a one big happy family so we could all just be as one.
Okay. All right. We'll come back to that in a few more minutes because I want to dig a little bit deeper into how we can do that. But Sister Shaniqua, why do you think, would you say that, and not just at Mount Zion, but I'm pretty sure young people maybe all around the world, they are not as enthusiastic in in a lot of the things that goes on in church. I know there's some good things, but first let me rephrase the question a little bit. As a young person, what do you enjoy the most in church, and what do you enjoy the least in church, in a church service? So the most and the least. What do you enjoy? Like, okay, like the service today. What did you enjoy the most today in the service, from beginning to end? And I know I'm putting you on the spot, but
What I liked from today's service was the praise and worship. It was really good. I felt like everybody was really enjoying themselves. You could feel that everybody was, praising, they were worshiping, everybody was feeling the song. That's what I pretty much enjoyed.
all right. And I hope nobody comes and gets you for this, but what did you enjoy the least? Okay. All right. You don't have to answer that because I'm afraid that somebody's going to come and get you for that. But let's put that question aside for a minute. Um, what when you go to church? What is it that you're not really excited about? You're not really enthusiastic about? Forget today, and I'll ask everybody else just to make you don't feel bad about it.
Okay. Um, on a regular day in church, I would say the one thing that I wouldn't say I don't enjoy it. It's just from me because I'm um how do I say, like, I'm a younger person, and I don't really enjoy, well, I don't, well, I do, but I don't, but it's the lessons in church. It's mainly because I don't un- I don't really understand it because, as an older person in church, you've been in church for so long and you're so quick to understand things. So when a preacher is coming up and they're preaching, and they bring out all the scriptures and they come up, they say what they have to say, they're quick to understand it. But as teens, not all of us are really understanding it.
Okay. All right. Um, brother Antonio, let's go with you. What do you? And I'll come back to you. Thank you, Sister Nico, for that. I'll come back to you in a little bit. What do you enjoy the least in church?
What do I enjoy the least in church? I actually have to think about that because I actually don't know. I think it might be. I think the same thing with Shaniqua. I mean, I like sometimes you won't see me clapping or I would just be swaying around because like I'm not that type of singing without dancing with that. I enjoy it within my soul. I don't show it, but like it's kind of weird for me to like if I had to clap or move and stuff like that because I just feel uncomfortable. But like I'm singing with myself and stuff like that.
Okay.
If
So not
I
really.
do,
Go
I
ahead.
do. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
Okay. But the lesson, I feel like I can understand it sometimes, but sometimes it just like goes too fast, or the topics are just repeated topics that I just already know.
Okay.
So sometimes I'm like excited when like a new teacher comes, and I'm like, oh, this one's gonna talk about something different for once. But like sometimes especially the lessons, they're like repeated lessons. They're like there's something like similar versions of themselves, and it's just stuff that I already know, or stuff I've already figured out for myself. And I'm just there listening to the same thing over and over again. So that's one reason I don't like the lessons. If they can maybe find something, because for an older person, they like hearing what they know on what's right, and they like hearing this stuff over and over again because it's them. But to us, we have a short attention span. It's just us, Gen Z and stuff like that. We like to move on and stuff like that. Well, I know for myself, it's just like I can't stand hearing the same thing over and over again. So that's just what I don't enjoy in church. That's the only thing.
I remember watching one of your programs where you all were putting on a skit. And the skit was about, I think somebody like, was it somebody like robbed somebody, and I think, was it you were the thief or something, or you beat up someone, and then you had to go to, they arrested you, and you remember that skit you guys did?
Yeah, I was the homeless man, by the way. It's just stuff like that is really nice, and it helps us because like we're like more physical, because like we see stuff, we have the phone and everything like that, and we're on the media, and we like to see stuff. So instead of listening to stuff, we like to see like stuff in our eyes. So when we see those type of stuff, we get to understand it more better and stuff like that. And even when we were working on it, we get to understand the actual moral and lesson of the story. That's just my opinion.
So would you say that perhaps if there is a way we can teach the same biblical concept, the same biblical things, then for you and maybe for others too, you would, once you're learning the moral of the story, once you're learning the concept, then it would be a good thing, right? Would you say that?
Exactly. That's exactly what I'm saying.
All right, Sister Brianna, what's your least enjoyable part of the service?
I'll have to say the preaching.
Okay.
I don't know. Sometimes it's just like I'm not gonna like, don't get me wrong. There are some preachings that I'd be like, okay, I understand this. But then sometimes it's like more of a, okay, what are you getting at? I'm trying to understand. And it's like, okay, you said this there and this there. And it's like, to me, I enjoy lessons more because then you get to ask questions. But when it's preaching, it's like you have to listen and observe. And then if you have questions later on, then I guess you ask whoever. But when it's a lesson, it's like your answers are being answered right there and then. And then it's like, okay, I have follow-up questions, but then what about this? Then what about that? If you understand.
Right. Okay. What about you, Sister Francine? What's your least enjoyable part of the service?
Honestly, personally, for me, I don't really have like a least thing. Like personally for me, I feel like I don't have nothing. Like it's not like me. Like it's not. I don't know how to explain, but it's like what Brianna was saying. Like the sermon. Like I don't. It's like it's not like I don't like the sermon. Don't get me wrong. Whoever's listening, but it's like what Antonio's saying. Like I think I kind of have a short attention span. Like people learn stuff from different ways. People learn stuff from hearing. People learn stuff from like touching. People learn from like watching. I feel like personally for me, I learn more by seeing something than to hear something. So if I'm in church and I'm hearing the preaching, I'm just gonna gaze off and sleep or something because I don't learn by like people talking loudly in the mic. is not gonna catch my attention.
Okay.
I feel like if I see stuff and like I can see it and stuff, like it's more easier for me to like grasp my attention to it. But I don't have no problem with anything in the church. Like I don't have a least thing. It's just that one thing. But like Brianna said, like lessons. Like I like lessons because you can hear people asking questions, and they're the teacher, like the response to the questions is like remind me in school when student asks question, and it's just easier for me to learn that way than someone's on the mic moving up and down preaching, and it's just my mind just gonna go across the moon, just like that.
Right. So you're more of a visual learner.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So again, we have Sister Rachel in the chat, and she would like to know, and I'll start with you, Sister Francine. I'm not sure if Sister Janelle is on with us, but if she is, let me know so we can invite her as part of the conversation. Sister Rachel would like to know, and I'll start with you, Sister Francine. What would you like to see in a church service? Like if you had the responsibility, you are now as a pastor, I'm appointing you as the coordinator for Sabbath service. What would be number one on your list? Give me your top three. What would you like to see in a church service?
More. Like I'm more like presentation. Like I like seeing stuff that's organized, seeing slides, like presentations, so I can just watch until they hear. I can read, like more presentation than preaching. Not to get wrong, not to get I have nothing against preaching, but more presenting
Okay.
facts and stuff than to just be. That's would be like my main priority. Like
Okay.
more presentations.
Okay. Which goes back to your being a visual learner. You like to be interactive with the things that you're seeing. Good. What would be your number two? Give me your number two.
Oh, my number two?
What else?
I don't know. I feel like more youth engagement. I feel like the youth is not really engaged. More youth. I feel like if youth was more engaged, there'd be more youth to come to church, and maybe people would be excited to be waking up Saturday morning to go to church. Like personally for me, like my parents have to come in my room multiple times to wake me up.
Okay.
So it's like for me personally, like if I know it's gonna be a nice day at church. Oh, that's wrong to say. I mean, like if I know there's gonna be something like active, like I know that I'm gonna do something active, like the youth is like engaged, like I know there's something exciting for people in the congregation to see, I would be more active to wake up than I know it's just gonna be a regular Saturday, the same preaching, praise and worship, and go home. It's not that routine it sometimes it does not correlate with my spirit. Like it does not I don't know.
I get you. I get you.
But yeah, it's like that.
Right. Right. Thank you. Sister Rachel, get ready because I'm going to invite you to be a part of this conversation here. Thank you for that. Sister Brianna, give me your top two, and then Sister Shaniqua, and then Brother Antonio. We'll go down the line. So you don't wait for me. Give me your top two. What would you like to see in a church service? And praise and worship. Don't say praise and worship. We already know that one for you. So give me something else.
I don't. Well, I would say we are already doing what I would like to see, but like maybe just more often.
Right.
Like, what was it again? The presentations. Basically what Francine said. It should just be more often, not like probably like on a special occasion or anything like that. Like it could be on a regular day, a regular Saturday.
Okay. Sister Shaniqua, thank you.
For my top one, I agree with Brianna and Francine. I would want there to be more interaction with the youth, like have more stuff going on. How we used to have Bible challenges and stuff like that, where all the teens and all the youth would get together, and I like everyone would just be so excited. Everyone would be in teams. We'd work together. It would be really nice. And my second one would also be that there'd be more preachings, and well, not more preachings, but preachings like lessons that we could all understand, and more interaction in the preachings so that they know that everyone understands the lesson. And yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Go ahead.
The two things I would actually agree with the girls about both of them, but well, like with more interaction with but like not within more interaction with the youth only, but with the whole entire church, because like that's when I realized that's when like the old people and the youth could actually come together and try to work to solve a problem. And I think that's one of the ways, like for example, when we used to play Bible challenges and everything like that, the older people would be giving us advice, and then we would try to mix in with the the new knowledge that we know, and we can get and stuff like that, and it's like back and forth, and that's how we came up with the correct answers and everything like that. So that's what I feel like those are one of the exercises that can bring the old people and the youth together. And also in the preachings, like more presentation and visual stuff is actually really nice. Like I can't stand listening to a person like to talk about this stuff, but it's not like listening to them talk, but like when they repeat the same thing over and over again, and I could just tell they repeat the same thing over and over. I'm like, wait, did I just hear that just a second ago and stuff like that? And it's just like it annoys me, even if maybe people might not realize it, like, or maybe he just had to say it because he thinks that people might not hear it. But to me, I find it really annoying. So that's why we can have visual stuff so that even if you miss something, it'll be on the board and people can just read it for themselves. So yeah, that's why like my 2 points.
All right. Okay. So we have Sister Rachel and Sister Valencia and Sister Melissa adding to the conversation. Again, you're joining us on the Bible and You. I'm enjoying this conversation, but I am also I'm also pastoring 2 churches down here in Florida. I'm and working with the ministers down here. So I want to now, for the few more minutes that we have left, just let me just take a few minutes and talk about this. Since you have we'll look at the comments. And Sister Rachel, I don't know if you want to add to the conversation, if you want to come on and speak to us on the points that you were making, Sister Valencia and also Sister Melissa. And then I wanted to bring the conversation to what can we do today, because I'm really, really excited to be with you on this platform, but at the same time, as a pastor, I also want to build. It's easy to talk. It's easy for us to sit and talk, but I want to build on what we can have tomorrow. And I thank you all for coming on, being on this program with me. But I want to build. Sister Rachel, I want to invite you if you want to just add to the conversation, especially the point you were making, something that can actually apply to my life, and then continue on that, and then we're going to go to Sister Melissa. Sister Rachel, if you want to just add to the point you were making.
Sure. Hey guys, how you doing? This is Rachel. I guess what I was saying was that a lot of the times in church, you're listening to the lesson and the preaching and all that good stuff, but you don't really know how you can apply it to your life, or if it even, applies. So I guess something that for me would be helpful is if in the lessons or the preachings, the teachings, whatever, if there were, practical ways to, apply it. Because you could say, don't do this, don't do that. Okay, but how don't I do this? How don't I do that? Like, how do I even apply this to myself, to people around me, whatever? That's basically all I was saying. Like, just, and have more relatable topics. Like, I believe her name is Valencia was saying, like, make it relate. Like, if it doesn't apply to me, more than likely I'm not gonna listen. So just something to make it apply. Yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, so can you give me an example of, and I know I'm just asking, but can you think of an example of maybe something that you have discussed? Because I remember, Sister Rachel, I don't know if you want to share that one of the things that you've spoken about is the idea of modesty. And you were sharing with us that when you learn that modesty is more of a lifestyle, it changed your view on how you dress as an individual, as a young sister in church. Would that be something that you think applies to your life?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I think,
right.
Yes, that's a big one. Because when I was growing up, I'm 23, by the way, if y'all were wondering. When I was growing up, typical pastor's kid, growing up in the church, always cover yourself up, wear these long skirts and all these other things. And you're looking around the church and no one is really like cute, you know what I mean? Or fashionable, or like, it's not stuff that you would want to wear. So you have like this misconception of what modesty is. You think it's just long skirts to your ankles and super long t-shirts or whatever. But so I had a hard time, kind of wrapping my head around, the whole modesty thing. It's like, that you're supposed to do it, but you don't know why. You know what I mean? It doesn't make sense to you. So just if I briefly, I read this book. I suggest it to you young ladies there. And even you, young man, they have a boy version. It's called Every Young Woman's Battle, Guarding Your Heart, Mind, and Body in a Sexually Saturated World. So it talks about all these things and why modesty is important and everything like that. So that really changed my perspective on it. Another thing was that when I was growing up, my mom would always tell me, where are you going with that on? Or like, that's not how a woman of God should dress. And I know we would have arguments all the time, but it was never really about clothes. It was like your heart posture. Like, if you don't feel like how you dress is a reflection of how you represent God, then it'll never change. So something that I read in the book was that it was talking about how it goes really deep into it. Like, I don't really want to get into it now, but one of the things that also changed my perspective was how it is an expression of love as well, for yourself, for God, and for others. For others, meaning your brothers in Christ, and how what we wear, kind of influences how they are. And I know a lot of the times we want to feel like, oh, they could look away or they can control themselves, But something that it emphasized was the love aspect. Like, if you understand how much God loved us, in the sense of he sent his son to die for us, for our sins, and you understand how the wages of sin is death, right? So if you know that a young man would be tempted easier just by looking at a girl, if you loved him and you understood that him sinning is basically, death, then you would try to help your brother in the best way you can by, covering yourself up and also honoring God. But it just goes on. It's a really good book. I suggest it. But yeah, back to what you were saying, topics that relate, that is something that would relate to me. Not just cover yourself up, but why? Why should I? Stuff like that.
Thank you, Sister Rachel, for adding that to the conversation. I appreciate it. Sister Melissa, I see your hand up. Can you go ahead? And then I don't know, Sister Valencia, I don't know if you wanted to add what you were saying in the conversation about that, but I want to give an opportunity if you want to do that. But go ahead, Sister Melissa. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes, I could hear you.
Okay, perfect. I'm really loving the discussion. I still consider myself to be young. Thank you very much. Um, I do have to say, I think it's really important for the older generations not to be afraid of change. I find that the younger generation, they're very inquisitive and they're very curious and they want to know why are we doing certain things? Why do we do this? Why do we do that? And I think the older generation feel threatened and they're not very receptive to that kind of atmosphere from the younger youth. And they tend to react negatively and feel that the younger generation is challenging or we want to break from, tradition or break from how things are going on. That's not necessarily what is going on. If, we are told to do something, you're dealing with a generation who wants to know, why do we have to wear skirts all the time, even in minus 33 degrees weather? And why, can't I wear braids if my hair is falling out? And why can't I warm up my tea in the microwave on the Sabbath? And all these why questions. And instead of sitting down with the youth and explaining to them in a loving manner as to why it is we do what we do, instead we're met with responses such as, it's in the Bible, or that's just what we have to do, or that's just how things have been done. And it's not the way to educate the youth, because remember, you're sending them out there into the world. And if they're in a high school setting and they're asked by their friends, well, why are you wearing a skirt all the time? And if their response is, well, my mom told me I have to, or just how it is, like, you're not really arming them in such a way to know what it is they're doing. So I think that the older generation need not to be so afraid of change. Change is not necessarily a bad thing. And we're not saying that we're breaking away from the word of God when, we want to do, it's just a curiosity. We want to know what it is, what we're doing. And the times have changed. Every change is the only constant. So
Right.
if a youth comes to you and they want to know why we're doing certain things, it's the way and the manner in which you approach them changes the conversation in such a way that it may help or it may hurt. So that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate it. Comment on that. Sister Valencia, would you care to expand on your comment in the chat, or no?
No, it's okay.
Well, I'll just read your comment to us, and for those listening to us on YouTube Live, that you'd simply mention that the topics that we should have topics that are more relatable to us, and by us I mean young people. Things that, as Sister Rachel pointed out, things that we all can relate to. So thank you again for putting that in the chat, and I appreciate that very much. All right, so in the few minutes that we have left, let me come back to Sister Brother Antonio and Sister Francine and Sister Brianna, Sister Janiqua. Let me thank you all for being on this program with us. Like I said from the beginning, the goal for this discussion this afternoon is in keeping with the theme, one body. This weekend, we were talking about being one body in Christ. And just like, the hands cannot do, I think there was an illustration this afternoon about, I don't remember, one of the young people, they were putting the body parts on different areas and different things to show that each body part or each has a specific area and a specific function. I think that was the point that was being made today. Which was a good illustration. Whoever came up with that was really great. We all can do things together. So leaving here, I want to challenge you to start building the change towards the change that you want to see? Young people. We've talked about communication. We've talked about how young people, they are different style of learning, and I think everyone has different style of learning. Some are interactive, some are visual, some are kinesthetic. They like to touch things and feel things. Some are more. Some people have multiple learning styles. Some people learn, and I do agree that as an older person, we have been doing things one way all the time. Sister Melissa made a very interesting point. It's somewhat hard to change. I encourage our young people to come to the forefront. I believe that young people bring to us a new way of doing things, a new way of seeing things. So moving forward, what can we build on? What can we build on today? And I want to start this part of the conversation. We just have a few minutes left. Start this part of the conversation by asking you, how would you do this? How would you do it differently? And here is my question. We'll start with you, Sister Francine. If you were supposed to go and reach out to some of the people that have left the church, they're no longer part of the church for whatever reason, and your job was to get them to come back and to be a part of the church, that's your job. What would you do? How would you get them to say, come back and be a part of it? What would you do differently?
Maybe the first thing I would do is, when I reach out to them, is ask them the reason why they left church, to hear their side. Because most people tend to just judge people who just leave church, but everyone has a reason unto what they do at the end of the day. So it's like, for me, it's like, I would ask them why, and it's like, maybe I would try to find some alternatives for what reason they have for them to try to come back. Not trying to necessarily like change the church, but try to find some alternative ways to see if it can kind of satisfy them, and not try to like jump at their throat and just tell them just encourage them, keep on encouraging them to just come. Like, you can't just tell them just come to church. You just have to keep encouraging them until maybe one day to just be like, okay, like, I would want to come back to church. They don't have to come all the time. Maybe you can just show their face once in a while, and maybe if they start seeing the change that they wanted to see, maybe they can start coming back more. If
Right.
that was me.
Okay. All right. Same question, Sister Bree. Would you like me to repeat it?
Yes, repeat, please.
Your job is to get the people that have left the church to come back, especially young people. What would you do? How would you get them to come back?
Well, I will agree with Francine and what she said, but it's also, you could only do so much as a person. You could only do so much. You can only say so much to a person to try to get them back. It also has to do with them and them wanting to come back. That
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree. They have a part to play as well. But what would you do? Let's say they're willing to come back, but they're disappointed. They've been judged. I mean, what would you do differently?
You mean as like if I was the one that caused them to leave?
No, 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 not if you were the one that caused them to leave. I'm saying it had nothing to do with you. You just would like to see them coming back. What would you do differently? Okay,
I don't really know.
it's it's okay. Um, that can be a very challenging question because we're speaking in hypotheticals. But I just wanted to find out like how can we build on something? Okay, so let me ask you a different question. We've talked about how, and you'd mentioned in the early part of the conversation that sometimes it's, the older generation, they like things done a certain way. They like things, they say this, done a certain way. And sometimes you'd mentioned earlier that people can be judgmental as well. What I am trying to do in this final minutes that we have is what can we do differently? What can we start off to do? Because we just had about an hour conversation about bridging the gap between the older and the younger. So what can we do today? If you knew someone who can be very judgmental in their approach, an older folk, um, what would you do to help me? Let's say me. I can be very judgmental when I look at young people. I feel like it's my way or the highway. What can you do to help me as an older person to begin to work towards bridging the gap? What are some ideas that you have that could help me? What would you do with me?
Well, maybe I would just probably advise you on how to approach somebody like in that situation, to approach that person. Like if I've noticed that you've probably come off passive aggressive or aggressively, I would probably say like, okay, when you're going to talk to that person, I do notice this and this about you. And then if you can just kindly, probably you don't notice it, but other people do notice. If you could just find that within yourself to probably approach that person in a different manner.
Right. Okay. Sister Shaniqua, um, from what we have been discussing and from what you've heard so far, from all of the things that you've talked about, um, what can you do as a young person to help bridge the gap?
Sorry, but what do you mean by breaching the gap?
Okay, so bridging the gap, meaning that you would agree that there is for lack of a better word, a gap between how older people and young people view things. We talked about the way we communicate, the way that we see things, the way that older folks, like when we were discussing, for example, if we were doing a lesson study, it's easy to just quote scriptures and to go through different things. But in some cases, we can say, maybe if like Sister Francine talks about that, she learns better if it's a presentation, if there's a presentation. I'm asking you as an individual, of all of the things that we're talking about, what do you think you can do to help? And the reason why I'm saying bridge the gap, I'm saying like solve some of the communication problems, solve some of the differences of the way we operate in church, to make the services more interactive for young people. What can you do as an individual? Thinking about all those things, what can you do? I'm asking you personally. Okay.
I mean, I actually, as a person, as myself, I wouldn't be able to bridge the gap by myself because if I try to do something on my own, but people might chastise me and be like, "Why are you doing that?" and stuff like that. So I think that we could not do it alone. We should do it as one group, as one. Have like an all-out plan so that we can actually start working on together to actually get stuff improved or done.
Okay. And I agree with you, Brother Antonio. The only way we can make a difference is if we do it together. As we discussed in unity, we have to do it together. I agree. But what I'm trying to get um, from you all, from all of you, is we have to start somewhere, right? We can talk about it like we're doing today, but we have to start somewhere. Something has to be done. The young people cannot just be. You cannot say, well, like you on one side and then the older folks on one side. So think about it this way: you have the young people here and the older people over here. So I'm saying, how can we begin to move together, like you talk about? This is an example that you gave us. Learn the language. If you're speaking German and I'm speaking French, I have to learn to speak German and you have to learn to speak French. Or we both have to learn to speak a language where we both could understand. That was the point you made, which was a very good point. So I'm saying, what can we do to begin to move forward? What can we do? That's really what I'm trying to figure out. Does that make sense, what I'm asking?
Yes, yeah, I think I know what to say now. The one side cannot change the matter alone. Both sides need to work together in an equal battleground to fight this battle together. What we can do together is by like how can we learn German if there's not someone to teach us German, or how can they can learn English if there's not someone to teach them English. So what I'm thinking is that we should actually try to work together, try to like see how we're doing this panel discussion with the youth. We should do one with old people as well, so that they can share their opinions and we can share our opinions and we can come on equal ground and actually try to find a solution together.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. Sister Shaniqua, I don't want to leave you out, but and that's a good point, Brother Antonio making. I don't want to leave you out, and I'm trying to break this down as clear as I can do it. What I'm trying to get from you is, and maybe this question is, since I'm just asking it as a new question, but if like what do you think? Let me put it this way: of all of the things that you enjoy doing in church, what do you let me go back to, what do you like the most? Let me put it this way: what do you enjoy the most doing in church? So, and I'm trying to get to your to that point. What do you enjoy the most in church? What do you enjoy doing the most in church?
What I enjoy doing the most in church is doing media. It's something that I've been doing for a while and I pretty much enjoy it a lot. Just to help people see how our congregation and how our church is as a whole and how we worship and everything is
And would you say that would you say that you're very good at it?
I'm not a professional, but I do know what I'm doing, but I'm not as top notch as the head Melissa.
Okay. All right. Now, when you do media in church and you showcase the things that everyone is doing in church and all of that, Do you get good reviews? Do people say they really enjoy your work?
We get both, but I do see on the chat, like when we're doing our live stream for church, I do see people commenting on the chat saying good preaching, nice service, they like the praise and worship, or if there's a performance, they'll say, oh, I like that performance. So it's it's both negative and positive at the same time.
All right. So, as a media expert, um, how do you think we can incorporate media as part of the ways where we can begin to work together? Like, do you think media can help in terms of making us work together? Maybe if we could get, as Brother Antonio says, maybe get a group of older people and a group of young people saying, let's do a program together. Let's work together. I don't know, maybe I'm thinking off the top of my head, maybe do a skit together, something together, and work together. Do you think media can help?
Well, by doing a skit together and like any type of performances together, it does also make a bond with both sides. So it would be easier with that bond for both sides to understand each other, understand their language, see from both perspectives.
Right.
And yeah, then we'll be able to understand each other and how would you say, unite.
Good, good. All right, so just hang in there for me. I want to go to Sister Valencia. She has her hand up, and I guess she wants to make a point. Go ahead, Sister Valencia. I noticed the point you made in the chat, but let me let you expound on that.
Oh, sorry, my hand was up for the question before.
Which was what?
I think it was the question on how are you able to get someone back in church? I think something like that. One of the youth.
Okay, all right. And I also want to congratulate you on your excitement and what you bring to praise and worship. Enjoyed it very much last night and today, and thank you for the work that you've been doing in the praise and worship team. All right. So how do you get someone back in charge?
So this is like something that sometimes I feel like you have to be trained for, because it's like your end goal is to win the person over. However, your approach can't show that.
Right.
If you know. So you're not gonna just invite the person to church. This person has pain. There's no trust. There's so much coming from that individual. So I feel like we as an individual need to build a relationship with them outside of church before we try to bring them inside the church. And when we we try to help them out like with all the pain that they're going through and understand everything. And then even like sometimes we're going out like as a youth, we invite them. It doesn't have to be like a big function. We just like, if it's something like within the youth, we could create a group or say, hey, we're gonna train this group for like to really tackle people who leave church. So we create things that, hey, we're gonna bring them out, say, hey, let's just go have dinner, or let's just play baseball. You know what I mean? These little things kind of breaks people down to open up to us, and therefore they could reveal all the pain and everything, and then we can move on for them from that. But it should never be our tactics to be first thing, try to just bring them in church. You know, our first concern is about them and the pain that they went through, and then we can move forward from there. The other question is the bridging. I think even in church, a lot of the decision making, something that happens, it's only like the adults make decisions. And you find the youths there's no voice. You might have a planning committee and there's no youth to really, that's what I'm saying. If we're the youth, why are we never involved in things?
Right.
You know what I mean? So even sometimes I'm like seeing some, I'm like, man, this is like 1950s. but it's only 19, and you can't blame them because at the end of the day, they do based on what they know.
Right.
However, if we create a space and we also have them involved in everything that we do, then you would see there will be a combination of both tradition and, like, I don't believe tradition is it's good to completely remove it, but you'll see a combination of tradition and the 21st century. And then you're basically, because you don't want to just, you have different audiences, right? So now that you'll be able to target both the youth and the adults.
Right. Okay. Great points. Thank you so much for sharing those with us. Were you done?
Yeah.
All right. Thank you so much for sharing those points with us. And I'm pretty sure that your youth leaders and your pastors who are listening, they're probably taking notes somewhere. I am all for building. I'm all for building because I realize that we want to see change. We want to see things different. And what the Lord has really placed on my heart is, anything that you desire, you need to really take the time, invest time in building it. And He's given us, the strength to build things. So I am now calling myself a builder. I'm not looking, because I understand that when I look at somebody else's church and I see they have a vibrant youth department, they have a strong praise and worship team, they have great music, they have, they have wonderful programs, I remind myself that somebody took the time to build that. It did not just drop from the sky. Somebody invested time, energy into building that. So I don't say, oh, how come we don't have that, or how come we do this? I say, let's work on building it. Let's give ourselves time to building it. So in today's conversation, we want to bridge the gap. I agree with all of you, and I want to thank you, Sister Francine, and Sister Brianna, Sister Shaniqua, Brother Antonio. Thank you so much. I have had a wonderful time. I know that sometimes my questions can be very difficult and very challenging, but you guys survived me, and I'm excited about that. And so I want to encourage you. I know the job is not just for you alone, but I want to encourage you, your youth leaders. I want to encourage Sister Melissa and others that work with young people, Sister Valencia, to let us start working towards putting a number of things in place, so that next year at convention, the conversation, encourage your leaders. Sister Valencia made a good point. Maybe that person doesn't necessarily have to be a board member, but maybe we could create an auxiliary committee that has both older folks and younger folks working together as maybe a committee that is responsible in putting together some ideas to submit to the board. Here are some things that we can do differently, and maybe that's something where you guys can start having those conversations. Maybe you could encourage Pastor Desmond and Pastor Hippolyte to come together with the youth and have conversations as to how we can build. And your youth leader, I'm not sure who that is, but if you can just start having this thinking with me, let's build what we want. I remember just watching you guys now. I think my last visit to Canada was in 2018, April of 2018, and maybe some of you guys don't remember me. But when I look now at where the church is, and I know that we're in the midst of COVID-19 and a lot of things are not the same as it was before, but I see that there's a lot of things that's done differently. A lot of the people that that I see on YouTube when you guys are on your services. Most of them I don't know them. So things have changed a little bit from the last time that I visited with you. And so I'm only encouraging you, as we discuss this, to develop the idea that if you seriously want to influence change, you have to develop the understanding of building it, building the things that you want, working towards it. Just like you would put a building, just lay down the the foundation, and once the foundation is laid, build on it. Keep putting the blocks on it in order to see that building that you want. So in closing, as we discuss building the gap, I don't think it's a difficult thing to build a gap. I think all of you can make those kind of contribution. Thank you, Sister Farah. Just for about the next 6 minutes or so, and we'll probably close at 9 o'clock. If there are any additional questions or comments or points, we want to do that. When you speak of bridging the gap, it represents putting something new to create flow. Sister Farah, would you like to elaborate on that point a little bit for us?
Okay, good evening. They're very interesting conversation. Young people have a lot to say. I must compliment them on that.
Yeah. I lost you there for a minute.
Exit the gap. You have to put like something new. So whatever new must the way that both the old and the new, like the young people,
right,
the generation before and the new and the next generation can find some commonality. Right. Sometimes you find among the young people, they say the older folks don't understand us. That's the complaint. They don't understand us.
Right.
So if you have to bridge the gap, it has to be where you understand what they are saying, so you can bring in you can address the concern, but they also have to understand that not everything that will be completely eliminated. Like there are things that we still hold on to. Like Sister Melissa earlier said that change also is something that also needs to occur, right? We cannot just say we want something new, but we have to also respect there are things that need to be held onto. And if both parties understand that, then that gap, that bridge, that we can erect that bridge, because now we understand that here is the situation, this is what we're gonna keep, and this is what we're gonna add. So that is where that bridge really represents something, like something old, something new, but it has to, because anytime you build a bridge, it's always at the present. You look at the current situation and say, where do we go from there? And how do we continue? How can the past meet the future or meet today, so that it can continue going on?
Okay.
That's my contribution. Really.
And I want to say that I really believe that the young people, they've already given us today, and just listening to them and talking with them, they've given us things that we can build on. Sister Francine, for example, when we were discussing how she learns, being a visual learner, and I'm pretty sure Sister Brianna, Sister Shaniqua, and Brother Antonio have all different learning styles. So here we are with, at least whoever is in charge of the lesson study. And I know maybe one of the things we can do is to incorporate a lesson study team, and these are just ideas, just listen to the young people that would sit down and say, Sabbath after Sabbath, what are some different ways we can teach this lesson? What are ways we can have the lesson to be incorporated? So what I see coming out of this conversation, for example, in talking to Shaniqua, is like the lesson study for the young people may be something that we have to go back and see how we can make it incorporate learning styles, because everyone don't learn the same way. I think someone, don't remember who, but someone was talking about presentations, doing things presentations. And I brought up the example of watching the young people one time doing a skit. Everyone, as long as the lessons are learned, as long as the moral of the lesson is being taught, it really doesn't matter how we teach it. And so that's one thing. Then we talked about, I think Brother Antonio brought up the idea of and in his own way, he was saying, if we have to get somebody who speaks French to learn how to speak German, or somebody who speaks German to learn how to speak French, we have to get someone to teach that. And that person must be fluent perhaps in more than one language in order to bring both parties together. And so we may have to, we're not looking for a linguist, but maybe look for somebody that we can bring together. Another very important point that Brother Antonio make, which I'm thinking that we can build on in Bridging the Gap, is maybe after this discussion, we can all come back and then have instead of having 4 young people alone, we can have 2 young people and 2 older people, and start having conversations and see how we can get together. What I want to suggest in closing, and I don't know if there are any other person who would like to make a comment, but we're coming to the top of the hour, and we would like to to close this broadcast. Is if you have 40 people in a room, what you will get is 40 different ways of doing something. I don't think we need 40 different ways. So what I suggest is, coming from this meeting today, is maybe we get a group of 5, a smaller group, that would think seriously as to what are some of the things, hearing this conversation, what are some of the ways, and that we can say that team of 5 people, their job is to now see how best we can bridge the gap. Speak to the young people, get their concerns, make a note of it. Speak to the older people, get their concerns, make a note of it, and then go back and say, how can we bridge the gap between those things? I'm very excited for this conversation. I do believe that you guys are on the right track in really approaching your theme. Some very good points were made today. And so I want to again thank the team of panelists for this wonderful job. I want to thank Sister Melissa for coordinating this with me and putting it together. And as the host of the Bible and You, we were very excited to have you with us today. So on behalf of Pastor Gill, I'd like to thank you for being part of our program today. I want to congratulate Pastor Desmond Francis on celebrating another convention, Pastor Jeff as well, and all of the members at Mount Zion. You guys are very dear to my heart, and I would love, for you to come back and be a part of our program on a different level. Thank you for all of you that are doing this work, and may God continue to bless you. Again, thank you, panelists. Great job. You guys were awesome. And I look forward to you guys doing more work. So again, have a good night, everyone, and we will end our broadcast here today. Okay. Are we still on YouTube Live?